Welcome to Adoptee Thoughts, the podcast where we explore the complex and often untold stories of adoption. I'm your host, Melissa Guida Richards, adoption educator and star-reviewed author of What White Parents Should Know About Transracial Adoption and its companion workbook. Each week, we'll delve into the nuances of adoption, unpacking the challenges, perspectives, and difficult conversations that come with it. Whether you're an adoptee, adoptive parent, or simply curious about the realities beyond the mainstream narrative, this space is for honest, thought-provoking discussions. We won't shy away from the tough topics because they matter. So thank you for joining in, and let's get into today's episode of Adoptee Thoughts. Can you please start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, my name is Hannah Cho. I'm a Korean adoptee. I'm a business owner, and I've been a long time kind of lived in I started on YouTube like 15 years ago. So the creator space before we really called it creators and influencers back in the day.
That is so exciting. I feel like a lot of people don't understand how different each social media is, but like
Right.
each little thing has their own community. Can you talk a little bit more about your journey as a content creator? How did you first like dive in? And
Now I joke, and I don't know, I've never heard anyone say this, but I consider YouTube, it's like the parents. They feel like, that's where it's kind of started out before and it turned into the machine that it is today. And then as a result, then there's like the children, like Instagram and, TikTok and everything else that's come out. But I feel like if you started on YouTube and that was your core, you're like a little older now, you have a little more wisdom, hopefully. But it started back in my teens, and it started out of a place of being a what do we call it? Transracial international adoptee, because I was raised in a white family, and obviously I am not white, and I am not white passing by any means. And I was raised, originally we were in Wisconsin, and then we moved to Arizona when I was 6 or 7. So both are states that are predominantly white communities. Now, Arizona. So then when I was a teenager, and took an interest in beauty and makeup.
yeah.
And then there was no one in my life with eyes like mine, features like mine. My mom personally wasn't someone who was into makeup anyway, so there was nowhere for me to turn. And so I turned to YouTube. And back then, like back in maybe 2007, 2008, it wasn't what it is now. It wasn't a business. It was still just people kind of on there sharing their hobbies before any of the big beauty gurus were even called that. And so I was able to go there and learn about my eye shape, learn about how to do my makeup for my face. And then I started creating content because my eye shape, particularly, they're called monolids, which is pretty an Asian thing, and there isn't a whole lot mainstream out there for us and people with our eyes. There is now, but there wasn't then. And so I started making reviews of mascaras and eyeliners that would work for my eyes and grew a community there. And I realized, okay, there's a space here on the internet. It was so genuine back then because I wasn't making money or anything from it. It was just literally for me to connect with other people, and what Asian community I didn't have in my personal life existed for me on YouTube. And then I just stayed following that trend of platforms, would get on Instagram when that became a thing, and TikTok, and I've just continued to live there genuinely for the community aspect. I've never made a ton of money from it. I don't monetize my YouTube anymore. For me, it's truly been an outlet and connection for me.
Do you monetize any of your other social medias?
I think, okay, so it's weird because I think TikTok, every so often I'll get a little from there, but I'm not sure how or why. I haven't kept up with learning. There's so many, everyone's rolling out their own programs and this and that. And so I just do it, and I try to keep it in a way. I run my own business now. So that's where I'm trying to, make money. So then everything else, I try to keep it non-business for me, just so I can keep it genuine and authentic.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Like the monetization is an aspect too. That's like another thing that creators have to go into, and that a lot
Yeah.
of like just consumers, it's like a passing thought, I feel. But
Yeah.
One of the things I really liked about the documentary is it set like a groundwork of like how social media works and how it worked when Micah Stauffer was starting out her journey. And it really went into like, oh, okay, you need these thumbnails and the different aspects of it that creators are, like that's in the back of their head. I feel like most of us. And then we have like the die-hard like content creators that like that's at the forefront. And I feel like Micah Stafer, she definitely was like one of those who was just she talked about going over the analytics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that was an important aspect of the documentary that not as many people as I'd hoped are like understanding. Like I feel
Right.
like I've heard comments that people were like, "Oh, well, they were just like fangirling, and they were talking about how social media works." And it's like that's an important nuance for the public who don't
Yeah.
necessarily know social media. Because
Yeah.
this wasn't a documentary just for creators and consumers of social media. This was for everybody, like on a
Right.
mainstream platform like Max. Like,
Yeah.
that's huge.
Hmm.
Um, how does the response feel for you? Because it's a lot to be in the public eye and have like, interviews and now your face everywhere
Right.
on people's
Right.
screens in their homes. That's pretty exciting. Like
Yeah.
how did that feel from start to finish when you were first introduced to this project?
So it was a couple years in the making. So it kind of felt like this, and I'm pretty generally my personality, I'm pretty casual and chill about things. So the process from beginning to end, I always thought it was a really cool experience. I felt really grateful to be interviewed and asked to be a part of it, but it never really felt like lights, camera, action. It never really felt like this big thing because it kind of happens like the interview process, it kind of happens on the back end. I got to know the director. She's amazing. We still communicate. Everyone I've met during it, but it's kind of this you're siloed because they interview me. I'm this one person, then they have to go interview other people, and you're not seeing, how it's coming together. So it just kind of I did my interview, and then just moved on with my life. And then it's
Mhm.
taken a little while to come out, and it's been quiet. Like so. I was nervous leading up. So they kind of let me know, okay, we think it's coming out. And they dropped a preview of it in the summer at Tribeca, but it really
Mhm.
hasn't been. I mean, you're the only person that's reached out, to be honest. And yeah, and so, and I don't know, some of it could be people are just starting to see it. There's multiple episodes. And then I look very different, I think, than I did in the interview. And I kind of do that. Like I love to drastically change my look, my hair. And so part of that could be it too. But to be honest with you, I don't want the focus on me anyways.
Mhm.
I want to just, I hope it comes off that I'm more helping tell the story so that we can focus on the really big topic issues, which is the family vlogging, the exploitation of children, adoption, exploiting adoption and adoptees. So I think they used me a lot because I hit this trifecta for them of I was a genuine fan subscriber. I watch family vlogs. So I have like the education piece that
Yeah.
people when I meet people to this day who are like, what's family vlogging, what's YouTube, like you either know or you don't. And so I have that. Then I also created content myself. I family vlogged for a while. I shared my daughter for a while, and I've totally shifted out of that. And then I'm an adoptee, so I hit all these different aspects of it. And so yeah, it has. I've heard from friends that are like excited to see me, but I think generally what I've seen is people just talking about the Stoffers and what happened, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's so important. And these get like slammed down with just sharing. So I'm very protective. So I always like to check in and see how they're
Yeah.
doing.
Well, and I
Um,
wonder because I do watch your content. I don't typically go to the comments. And so I don't typically do that anyways, because I just, unless I know it's a funny thing and there's going to be funny jokes or whatever. But
yeah.
I love what you put out there. But I can imagine you have more of a target because this is your platform. And so I feel like you probably trigger people right away unintentionally because you're like, we're talking about adoption. We're talking about what's wrong, what's right, and so then that probably sets people, I'm hoping the way the docu-series is coming out, and it is, I think the director, they did such a beautiful job with it. And I feel like they're hitting it, but not being so aggressive with it because they want people to watch and kind of take it in. And we are talking about children in this. So I'm hoping maybe it's less triggering towards adoptees and just making adoption something people are going to be more mindful of, you know,
I think
thoughtful. Let's
that's
stop and
key.
think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's so key here. And that's like the part that I feel like isn't settled. Like people have made comments that I've heard is just like, why aren't they harder on the Stoffers? Like, why are they
Yeah.
like, it sounds like they're building them up. But when you're part of this world, especially for like, there's like millions and millions, you know this, people who
Hmm.
watch this content every day. Like
Hmm.
a lot of some people are obsessed, some people are just diehard fans. And when you're introducing the idea that maybe this shouldn't be normalized, maybe there are issues here, you
Hmm.
can't just smack people with the truth in
Right.
a format like this because they're not going to listen. They're going to get
Right.
defensive. And
Right. Yeah.
I think that like with me, with my work, like I have my own like social media, so I can be very upfront there.
Yeah.
But when I transfer and do interviews or I'm doing workshops, I don't just show up and I'm like, like slamming
Yeah.
down like books and facts and
Right.
oh, face
Right.
this because people aren't, it's not palatable. So
Right.
I'd like to dig into more your experience. Like you said you family vlogged for a little bit. Can you talk
Hmm.
about like why you transitioned out and
I think, being a part of this documentary, and again, so for me, this has been alive in my life for years. This documentary and this topic is what was pivotal in me making that personal choice. Now, I
Mm,
have a lot of different opinions on it just because I'm generally someone who sees all sides. I want to say really quick too, I was angry with everything the Stoffers did. I agree with pretty much all the content that's come out, even the people that were like, just saying the wildest things. I'm like, I personally think it was deserved what they did, how they did it. But exactly what you said, and I've talked to the director about this, and I'm not mad about people whose commentary so far is like, why weren't they more upset or why aren't they, it is just we're having a conversation piece. And if we come out too strong, it would just be a turn off. So I just want to say that. But I think, it genuinely was family vlogging. I stumbled into it back in the day, like a lot of the original people did.
yeah.
Again, before I made a few $100s from it at some point, but I wasn't going, I'm going to quit my job and do this full time. It wasn't for the money. I'd already been sharing makeup. And then I got engaged and married. And then people were like, we want to meet him. So we do a boyfriend video. And then, I share us getting married. And then I get pregnant and and I did start to see growth again. So I saw growth in the early days beginning doing makeup, and then it was stagnant. And then I did see growth during the pregnancy time. And it was naive, like genuine naivety going, well, I'm going through this, I'm going to share it. And then you get 13,000, 30,000, 50,000 views of other pregnant women going, I had that same symptom. How'd it work out? And so again, for me, being kind of ignorant at the time and just seeing one lane going, well, this is genuine, we're connecting. And then I have my child, and of course, I'm going to keep going. So I keep serving her up to people because that's what we're doing. We're daily vlogging. How the production team found me for the documentary was during the first year of quarantine, I daily vlogged.
Mm,
And I would vlog every single day and then upload it every 3 to 4 days. And that summer of that first quarantine is when the Stoffers came out with their infamous An Update on Our Family. And so it was organic for me to wake up every day. I check your phone like everyone, and then I start filming. Well, that day I woke up and it was like, and I followed all the different adoptees in the community, and it's the Stoffers and look at so I'm intaking that, and then I turn on the camera and I talk about it, and I don't talk about adoption and being adopted a ton. It's not my platform, but it's not something I'm embarrassed to talk about. I love talking about it, to be honest. So
yeah.
it was organic for me to film it, talk about it, put it up, and then that's how the production team found me. But to fast forward, I eventually burnt out of the vlogging, and I kept those videos up for a while. And then when the documentary came out, and I just start going down then the lane of why, you know, our kids don't have consent, exploiting them for money. The money part really gets me. Well, those two things. And
Mhm.
it's funny because at the time I did the interview, and I was already starting to think, my daughter's getting older, and her personality by nature, like at the time she was maybe 4-ish, she's a shyer kid. She's
Mhm.
not that kid that wants to be in front of the adults and have the microphone and get the attention. That's her personality. She's trending that way. So then for me to keep filming her and putting her out to thousands of hundreds of people, millions that she doesn't know or see, I'm like, I can imagine her becoming an adult and being embarrassed because she is a kid that doesn't like it anyway. So I started to think about that personally. And then the documentary came out or started being worked on. And I went, yeah, I just don't feel comfortable with it anymore. Now I keep the videos for myself, to embarrass her with personally later, but not for the whole world to see. And that was a personal choice. And so I think two things. I think there were genuine vloggers who fell into this like I did and stumbled into it. And then it did become a business machine. And let's hope now people are starting to learn and think and be thoughtful. And then I do think then there's the new generation of family vloggers that are doing it for, I think, the wrong reasons. And that's a whole nother topic.
I think when it comes to like blogging, like that is an aspect that is important too, is like falling into it because you can go viral over the silliest thing.
Right.
And
Right.
so we have like, because we're focusing on adoption here, we talk about adoptive and foster parents will post a video of like the baby giggling or trying a new food or something like that. Takes off, millions of views, and all of a sudden they're swarmed 20,000, 30,000, and
Yeah.
the numbers keep going up. Oh, I want to see this. Like, oh, well, tell me your adoption story.
Yep.
Do you struggle with infertility, blah, 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 blah. And that
Yep.
adds on to this
Mm,
pressure. And like it's you feed it or you let it sizzle out. But when you do that, especially when you're talking about an adoption, when it's like the perspective of the adoptive parents who wanted a parent so badly, whether or not they were
mm,
struggling with infertility or had other kids, like that's something generally people are like, yay, I'm going to have another child. I'm going to be able to help them and nurture them, excited. And so putting that out there, and then other people are like, wow, that's great. That's wonderful. Then it feeds and becomes a
right.
whole other beast.
Right.
And the other side kind of gets pushed away. We don't
Right.
see a lot of the trauma. And so I think
Mm,
that was also an interesting thing because Micah was like mentioning, oh, I didn't know X, Y, and Z. I didn't know that it was going to be this hard. And
mm,
I think one of the clip of James that really got me when they first went to China to get Huxley, and he was sitting there vlogging by himself, and he was just like, he had a mom, like he had a
mm,
foster mom who was taking him to the park
mm,
every day. Oh my God, my heart. And I was
mm.
just like, part of my like the cynical adoptee part is like, well, you should have realized.
Right. No, yeah.
But but then like being a mom now, being a parent who has
Yeah.
done kinship care, who has, like worked with a
Mm,
lot of children, I'm like, I get that. I get wanting to be a good thing in someone's life. I get
mm,
wanting to help so bad
mm,
and not and being angry at like the system and like how it's set up.
mm,
You have to do X, Y, and Z to be able to help a child. But you're
mm.
forgetting that they need support in these ways too. It's focused on time, it's focused on money.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that the adoption industry in the United States is a multi-billion-dollar business. And now
Yes.
we're adding in social media as a gold mine. That
Right.
that is really hard to resist. Even
Right.
like most noble of people coming with an offer, sometimes these brand deals can like range up to like
Right.
$40,000, even more than
Right.
that. A
Right.
family like seeing that kind of money in this day and age and this economy,
Yeah.
like in a way, it's understandable. And then we have the reality of like exploitation. Like, how do
Right.
we find a middle ground here where children are safe, families can and share their stories? Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
So it sounds like ultimately you decided to stop family vlogging, right? And
Mm.
pull those videos. Did you pull all the videos?
Yep.
Okay.
I kept up one. About a year ago, I went through and I demonetized anything that had my daughter in it.
Mhm.
Anyways, I wasn't making a ton, but I just turned off that option altogether because that's the icky aspect to me too. Is like
Yeah.
I'm getting paid. I'm getting paid to show my daughter. Like if we just say that one sentence, I'm getting paid to show my child.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that make everyone stop and go, pause for okay? So that, and then I took everything down or privated a lot of it, most of it, and I just kept up a couple key ones that might have her in it because I am talking about my adoptive story, the video that helped the producers find me, where I'm talking about the Micah stoffer when that first broke out. But other than that, I think I've pretty much taken everything down of her. And I just want to say, please let your cynical adoptee self come through because these are the type of conversations I want to have because, in my opinion, where I've landed, and as much as like I'm someone, again, who generally I'm like, let people do what they're going to do. And I don't have a lot of judgments on what other people are doing, but let's all have judgments about what people are doing to children. I think that's an area where I can go, yeah, no, there's pretty black and white lines there. And so with the knowledge we have now, I feel like the simple answer is like, we should not be sharing our kids as much as we're sharing our kids. That's just my honest. So when you talk about things like, okay, people are sharing about their journey and it is a genuine, like they're just sharing because they're happy or adoption, whatever they're doing, and then they realize there's connection. Okay, that is genuine. People go, I'm going to adopt, or I was going to adopt, and it's good to see what you've gone through, right? True. But then let's focus it then on the adults and them being like a community for each other. You don't have to show the kids so much. You don't have to do an ad where you're getting paid because you're showing your kid. How about you do an ad because you're an adult and you're consenting? And then I think this is where we see the lack of, we need people like you and Cameron and the people that are the places where, okay, when they go, well, there wasn't a place for me, I didn't have support. Well, now there is. There's no excuse. You can find it all online. Just do a little Google. You can find everyone's books and their podcasts, and it's out there now. So there's no more of that, like, I didn't have anywhere to go. Well, now there's experts. You can go find your support. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't need to be this, well, we were just, now, you know what I'm saying?
That excuse doesn't fly anymore. Like
Yeah.
that's what my mom said. Like, well, we didn't have anything. They didn't teach us anything. And like back then, like, you'd have to go to an encyclopedia and like go look up phone numbers and then call people.
Right.
Maybe there was like a meetup with the adoption agency, but it was mostly just fundraising. Like it wasn't created to support families and like this.
Yeah.
It was again about the money. And
Mm.
and when I first heard about Micah Stafer, it was back in 2020. I actually wrote an op-ed for Business Insider, and like you said,
Okay.
like I was a bit harsh. The title that they gave it said, "I was adopted outside of the U.S. and have disabilities. I'm tired of the white savior narrative among
Yeah.
adoptive parents," and that pretty much sums it up because I was pissed. Like, my parents aren't perfect. They made a lot of mistakes when it came to my adoption. But I have to say, one of the things that they never did was like exploit my story. They never like put me out there and were like, oh, well, look at my child. Adoption is great. Put them on a
Mm.
pedestal, that type of thing. Because even though like Micah Stafer exploited Huxley in a very public way and a permanent way on social media, because once you put
Mhm.
things on the internet, they stay forever.
Mhm.
But there are many other adoptive families out there who are doing similar, just on a smaller scale. I have
Mhm.
interviewed and talked to so many adoptees who were forced to go in front of their church congregation,
Yeah.
testify of, like how adoption saved them, like why it's so important. I've had like, kids who were
Mm.
forced to stand outside Planned Parenthood and
Wow.
stuff like that. It's there, and like I feel like a
Right.
lot of us want to be like, oh, well, about it. It's like, oh, when I talk to family members and I'm like, oh yeah, this happened, this was a funny story that happened to my kid, but would my kid want me sharing that? I think this definitely
Mm.
helped me be more aware. But there definitely was a lot of anger, and I think outcry from not just the adoptee community, from the community at large. And like in this part, I think it was part two, they showed the clips in the beginning of like people saying like, oh, if I find her, like very
Mhm.
aggressive threats and stuff
Mhm.
that the police got. And on one hand, like I think back when I first heard this story, I'd be like, she deserves every single bit of that.
Mhm.
And for me too, like I deep dived into their story.
Mhm.
Like, people don't understand that a majority of adoptive couples, when they're seeking to adopt, it's primarily pushed by the woman typically.
Mhm.
And most of the adoptions are kind of due to infertility in that aspect, and the man kind of, like they're supportive of their partner. But so going into this, I read and I watched so many videos of Micah, and she was talking about in several different places about how, she felt called to adopt, and how she kept mentioning it to James, and how they would pray together, and how he was a little hesitant, and how he didn't really, he wasn't very sure about it. And then like it seems like they get tied up in this, and it's a question of just like, is adoption really a good thing? As is,
Mm,
It's debatable, but
right.
people equate adoption, especially international adoption, adopting a child
Mhm.
from a third world quote unquote country,
Right.
as saving a kid, but they don't realize that there's a lot of risks there. Micah Stafer is just one of many families who have rehomed children, and
Mhm.
there have been many adoption dissolutions, and that part of it is under the radar. Like these things
Mhm.
really aren't monitored by our government.
Mhm.
There are Facebook groups that people go to, and it's like, oh, well, I can't really raise my child anymore. And then they have like little ads with a picture.
Yeah, that's
The
wild.
child is 4 feet, whatever. She loves rainbows and
Wild.
trees. Like, what? This
Yeah.
isn't an advertisement for cattle. This is a
Right.
human.
Right.
So it's just overwhelming, I think, this
Right.
whole thing, because like once you poke a little hole in this, like it all
Yeah.
comes out. I want to talk about like the parasocial relationship aspect,
Okay.
because I like struggle because I have a few family vloggers that I've been watching for a while, and I'm like,
Right.
I really enjoy them. One of my
Right.
close friends
Okay.
has a whole channel with like millions
Yeah.
of subscribers, and it's a family vlog channel.
Yeah.
And like I am constantly warring with like, how do I support my friend? And if I look at it black and white, like
Mhm.
those are really clear boundaries. Like, but people's relationships, how they treat their children, where that money is going, because
Mm,
in this day and age, I think we have to admit that like there
of
need to
course.
be more protections in place. And I think like 2 states now have laws, but the majority don't have any laws. California has really good laws when it comes to kids. Um, and parents are supposed to set aside like 15-20% of the
Mm,
income in a special account for the kids. Now there's 2 states that are doing similar with social media influencing and
mm, mm,
adding in like clauses where parents have to take down the content if the kid ever decides that they don't.
mm,
There are different protections that are going in, and I think the family vlogging is something that's just not going to stop,
mm,
unfortunately. So it's kind of just like not damage control, but
mm.
moderating and finding like a happy medium where children can be protected and families can have this income that, has been life-changing for many.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but in a safe way that the children aren't just being left on the outside.
Like, I think when you're talking about this whole dynamic, my thought in my mind is it needs to be regulated. But
Mhm.
the issue, just like everything else, it needs to be regulated. But the issue is nothing is ever regulated well. Because at what macro, micro, who steps in, who regulates it, and it's never done well in any to take family vlogging, any business, anywhere, because money's involved. So whenever
Mhm.
money is involved, it gets messy, it's complicated, it's disingenuine. And I think I have this thought too with the vlogging and the cameras and it being performative because no one turns on a camera, is in front of a camera, even if it's a photo or video without there's like an internal, even if you're thinking you're being as yourself, you're speaking louder, you're speaking more eloquently. So for kids, even when we were kids and there wasn't phones, when our anytime a camera would come out, our parents
Yeah.
would smile, smile, smile. It's like this, why do I need to look happy right now? So there's no way that it's not doing something to them. I just want to say that,
Oh,
because
that we have other influencers like Bella Lambert out there who is like posting videos of just like, oh, my social worker just called and let me know there's a baby like in line, like we're gonna be
yeah,
parents. Like, were you just recording all day and like waiting?
right.
There are theatrics behind
Well, and
it.
what
Like,
I would hate to think, again, growing up when we didn't have this, but I have my issues with my adoptive parents, and they were not great. My adoption story is one of the ones, the unhappy ones, I would say. So, but my mom was one of those people that would have her issues and outbursts and her rage, and then you pull up to church, and then it's like
mm,
that. So to me, that's what I think of with vlogging. I'm not saying they're all that way. I think that way with cameras in general.
mhm.
Vlogging, TV, whatever, is you're putting your best foot forward. So there's no way I think if you're in the living room with those children and the mom takes the camera out, oh, look what we're doing today. Look, kids, blah, blah, we got this new toy, blah, blah, blah. And then when they shut the camera off, it's like, are you still that happy, jolly mom? Or is your kids then having to try to dissect and understand like my mom seems happier when that camera's out and then she's not, like it's just, again, this is all psychology that we're still at the cusp of figuring out and unpacking. So that I just have commentary now. I don't have any answers. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not telling all the family vloggers to stop doing it. That's not who am I to say, but I just don't know that we know enough yet. And one thing I will say about the Stauffer situation is they said it in the second episode, the couple that they were interviewing that had also adopted. And they were like, what this couple did to us was they showed us adoption is trauma. Like that sentence right there was
Mhm.
so important because I think as much as what they did was wrong in a lot of ways, I genuinely think there was some genuineness to some of what they did. Then you mix in the money and the views. So it's like maybe at one point she did think about adopting. I think a lot
Yeah.
of people do. In the side, they go, maybe I will adopt, maybe I should adopt for whatever reasons. And then it turns into this whole other performative thing. But I think they ended up being a example for us, when all is said and done. And I really think they were one of the true people to ever be canceled because nowadays you can be canceled, but you just come out with your apology and then
But it's
a
not.
week.
Micah was canceled.
Yes,
James
I
still has
know.
a
I know. I
successful
know. I know.
YouTube channel.
Yeah, I mentioned that to my husband the other day. I said, well, he still has a channel. And my husband was like, could not, like, he could not, and I said, well, he just never really, showed the family on there and he just kind of kept it a thing. I think I liked her because, she was good to look at. Like, let's be honest, you want to watch people that are good to look at. She doesn't look like me. And what happened is a lot of the beauty gurus I watched who were Asian
Yeah.
ended up getting married, starting families, and they all created vlog channels. So it was a natural, organic thing for me to follow before
Yeah.
again we knew. And so she was one of the few that I followed that wasn't Asian, to be honest, but she just pumped out content so much that
Mhm.
I always felt entertained by her. So that was a part of the aspect that kept me hooked because whether she was talking about pregnancy and later the adoption, earlier on, it would be like what she was eating. It would be how to clean your house, how to resell from thrift stores. Like her content it wasn't one note in the beginning. And so that kept me hooked. And then I got pregnant, and then her pregnancy videos were relevant. And then when she introduced that they were going to adopt, it sucked me right back in because
Mhm.
I went, again, at the time, I hadn't seen content like that. I had seen grown adult adoptees, a lot of them Korean adoptees, talk about, oh, my birth family search, or I've submitted my DNA, or I went back to Korea. Wow. But to see someone start it from the ground up, and
Yeah.
then there is a little bit of personally kind of relating with Huxley, and I'm going to watch his journey, and wow, they're going to do this great thing, you know, and then we know what happened.
Yeah.
That's what kept me hooked in the beginning.
I get that because as an adoptee and who had a very complicated adoption story, so I didn't have like the typical American cookie cutter upbringing that a majority of my peers did, like growing up
Mm-hmm.
in suburbs in a majority white area in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like one of the things that I enjoy about family bloggers because I'm like, what? Like people have game nights with their family. They go out and do these things or do these
Yes.
activities with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
What? And so
Yeah.
like when we're becoming parents, like that's like an area where it's like no one gives you a guidebook, but all of
Right.
a sudden now we have all these examples. So I get
Mm-hmm.
being like entranced and like finding an attachment. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I just like you said, there's no rule book, and I feel like it's past time that adoptive parents figure out like a bare minimum of what's okay. Not just like basic things that people need to think about. It's like when you put your child's face out there, that's going to follow them for the rest of their lives. So one of the thing I really makes me feel more comfortable with watching one of my friends' content is like she doesn't use her children's real names. She uses nicknames.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay.
when she goes to an event or like say she's going to Disney World, she's like, "Oh guys, I'm going to Disney World vlogging," but she doesn't post that for like several weeks. So it's like making sure she keeps safety in mind. And then the most like important thing I think is the exploitative aspect where I think of the income that comes in goes to into each individual bank accounts for the children.
Nice.
And so that's to me was unheard of. Like
Yeah.
I have like interviewed and talked to a lot of content creators that include their children that don't. And like a majority will be like, yeah, I set some money aside. And it's like, well, how much? where's the rest of that money going? Oh, you got a new car. And then you have like all these other families that are just like, oh yeah, we're gonna move to this $1 million house now.
Of
We're gonna do
course.
that. And it's just like, okay, is it for the kids? Is it just for the family? Because
Yeah. Well, and I had this thought. And so let's go back to some core basics that we know. When money's involved, it's messy, right? Money will do things to people that we don't, they never, sometimes it sneaks up on people. They're like, I never thought
yeah.
I would do that for money. So that's keep that in the back burner. But I had a thought like last night, I was thinking about this. So let's say, okay, they are starting to make money and they did it like organically, maybe even innocently. They were sharing their family, not just the Stoffers, but in general, the family vloggers. And like people are liking when they show their kids and what their kids like to eat. I made one of my viral videos on YouTube was like what my 9-month-old eats because we baby led weaned and that was new. And people watch it because they're, what do you do? Genuine. And then like 2-month-old, what my or 2-year-old eats. But okay, let's say you start making good money from it. And I can see where a parent goes, all right, well, like a job provides for the family. You're going to buy your internet, you're going to buy your groceries, you're going to buy clothes, you're going to do that because that like a regular job pays for your lifestyle. This is like a job, it pays for your lifestyle. But I think where it gets murky, and again, what we haven't figured out yet is can you do that then and not show your kids and still
Mhm.
make the money? And if you're really good at this and you're really talented and you're really interesting, then you should be able to figure that out, I think,
Yeah.
without showing them. I don't know. That's the thought I have because I can see where people start to go, well, I'm buying a new car and a $1 million house because this is our job and just we are successful at it. But it's like, was that off the faces of your kids?
Mhm.
Or, so that's like, and I'm not
Yeah.
judging anyone. There's some other people in the documentary that are family vloggers who I enjoy and respect. And again, I'm not trying to get anyone canceled. That's not my heart in this at all. I just want people to start thinking.
Mhm. Yeah.
Just let's start thinking about some stuff. Is there a different way to do things? I have seen some people start, blurring kids, their faces in their new content. I'm like, okay, and again, they can still share the content. And you mentioned, watching it's the wholesomeness of these families doing game nights and stuff. And there is again a genuine draw. I use that word so much, but of like when you have your first kid and you are not around a lot of kids, and then you're like, okay, what toys do other kids like? Or what
Mhm.
books you learn like that are informative and educational and
Yeah.
confident building and how are you disciplining and how are you and you look to those people,
And
so that's where we got blurry.
yeah, yeah. And then we have this adoption element. And I think that's unique for like the public. Like there's that draw because a lot of people don't understand like how adoption works, the
Yeah,
process.
yep,
They
there's a lot
see
of
the family and
unknowns.
they're like,
Yeah.
whoa, how did that happen? But I feel like for adoptees, it's interesting to see families and it's just like, oh, this could have happened like if my mom kept me, like if I was raised by my biological mom,
Oh, that's interesting.
she would be
Yeah.
going to these ultrasound appointments. She would be like so excited picking out nursery furniture. And then when it comes to creators like Micah, it's like all of a sudden you're like, wow, there's excitement and fun in different ways. Like, oh, she was having a baby shower. She did X, Y, and Z. And then like being able to pull up pictures of my mom, my adopted mom's baby shower. And I'm like, wow, she must have been so happy just like her. She really wanted me. My
Mm,
parents wanted me. Like they went through this
mm,
whole process and like it wasn't easy for them either.
mm,
And that like kind of humanizes our parents, I think, a lot more.
yes, 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 yeah.
That's another aspect of why I enjoy the content, which is interesting because like I am very critical, but it's just like you said, trying to navigate the murky
Yeah.
waters here.
Knowledge.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And can really speak on it. What I found in my personal life, to be honest, one of the reasons I don't talk about adoption a lot, and this is no flack on any of the people in my life, I love them dearly. I don't have any close adoptee friends in
Yeah.
my actual day to day. And so when adoption does come up, or like, oh yeah, I was adopted, or whatever, however it comes up, I get a lot of the like the air leaves the room, like no one says anything. And this happens on multiple levels. Again, I love everyone in my life, but I have a core Asian group of friends, but outside of that, most of our friends around me are not Asian. They're not adopted. And so if Asian stuff comes up or adoptee stuff comes up, often people don't want to speak because I think they probably don't want to say the wrong thing or be offensive. They don't know what to say. Well, that just killed the conversation. Let's pivot back to something we can all talk. You know what I mean? Like,
No,
so
I
it's nice to
totally
have this
understand.
dialogue.
Yeah, I think that's why like the online community is so important to many
Yeah.
adoptees. because we can find and connect with other people.
I was on the ride with her and everyone else I was watching on YouTube
Mhm.
at that time. And this would have been back, in 2015, 2016, around there. I was consuming YouTube content just like every other. It was entertainment and content. And I never quite had a check yet. And I think part of it too is denial personally, because I wanted their story to work out so well.
Mhm.
I wanted it to be positive. I wanted it to be like Huxley's happy and loved and well adjusted and like cool. Maybe this will again create some good conversation. I didn't have that like, ugh, until an update on our family came out. And then it was like the flip.
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate you sharing your experience with it because
Yeah.
like I feel like people who like were diehard fans just like get embarrassed and then they're just like,
Mhm.
oh, well, yeah, that was like a trend or whatever. Like everybody was following them. It doesn't really matter. But being able to look back and like seeing that our support of something and like the development of it is like, wow, I did miss these signs. Like this is
Yeah. We change and we grow with experience. So, like, I have a video on my YouTube from forever when I was younger talking about my adoption story. And it's all positive and all the cliche things that we were taught to say. And
Mhm.
then I have an updated one now because I've grown
Yeah.
and I've learned and I've unpacked some stuff. And then I go, wow, I watched my original. That's like super cringy. My opinions have totally changed.
When I was watching episode 2, there was a
Yeah.
moment, I think it was like after the family had posted videos of their trip to China and like coming home and like the adjustment and how difficult it was. And during one of your interview snippets, you said it was a different emotion than what you felt their channel was leading up to.
Mhm.
Can you describe that emotion and like what you were going through?
I was sad. And I think that it caught me off guard. Again, if you're ignorant, ignorant is bliss, and you're going, oh, we're just like happy. And then that video, like core memory almost of when they first meet Huxley, and we're, oh, this is the thing we've all been waiting for genuinely. And then he's scared.
Hmm.
And you can't deny that. We're watching it. And then this is the part of like vlogging and reality TV where you go, oh, I want to look away, but I've been watching this, I'm invested. And I think internally, micro and macro, in my physical body, I had a reaction that I wasn't expecting because it was triggering. And so I think that's when some of the dominoes for me, just the rose-colored glasses started to come off. And regardless of how much I loved the offers or didn't, take them out of it, it's realizing this child, this is his life and his experience. And I was relating to his emotion. He was scared, he was afraid, it's upsetting. I'm scared for him. I'm upset. It when I watched the second episode, it brought all that back and I cried again because it's just they showed it all. We watched his trauma happening.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
wild.
Thinking about growing up in an orphanage, I was only there for about 5, 6 months. And
Okay.
like coming home to New York with my new family, my mom, she has told me stories that how I was like inconsolable at night. Like I would just cry and cry and cry no matter what she did. And she was like, I don't know why you were so upset. Like I just did everything. I fell asleep like leaning over your crib, patting you on the butt, like, trying to soothe you. And it just seeing Micah and James just kind of settle in, I feel like they
Yeah.
took a big step backwards emotionally and were trying to let it like sink in like what this really means for the dynamics of their family, their relationship between each other. And so to see how drastically that affected him at that age, like I feel like you said like that was like the pivotal moment of this documentary where they said like adoption is trauma and that's
Mhm.
huge.
I think that moment was like when reality became reality. Like,
Another thing that you mentioned in the doc was terminology when it comes to adoption. So
mm,
you talked about how your parents called it gotcha day. Can you share a little bit more about your experience with gotcha day?
yeah, I think uh, I was a late bloomer to a lot of things as far as just, realizing what I wasn't okay with, what was not, what was mistreatment in my life. As a kid, my sister and I both were both Korean adoptees, not biologically related. We were adopted at two different times. And we liked Gotcha Day. It was an extra day to celebrate and get attention and whatever. It was positive for the most part. And then as I got older, I didn't care for it as much because I felt like in our personal lives, it was this day that again celebrated what my parents did as well. It was sure we got you, but then we go down memory lane of how great they were and they saved us and rescued and all this. And then there was nothing around it that supported anything else. So I've met other Korean adoptees who they had a gotcha day, but then they also would go to camps and learn about their culture and their food, and their parents actively got them involved. We didn't have any of that. So before cameras, that's more performative. And I don't care for it now. I think let's figure out what the kids and the adoptees want to do about it.
When, like back in the 80s and 90s and even before that, like there was this one woman, I have to look up her name, but I talked about it in my first book. She set up the framework for positive adoption language. They call it PAL, P-A-L,
Oh,
because there was a lot of stigma about adopting.
ah,
So they were trying to make it look like this is a
ah,
great thing to
I
do.
see.
So they're like, to do that, we need people to think good things. And like, so it was like, oh, we made an adoption plan and like the baby was
Mm,
placed for adoption, like taking away like terms like, oh, they abandoned the baby, they didn't want it.
ah, ah,
Problem with positive adoption language is it has the opposite effect. It forces people to think of adoption one way. There's no nuance there. So that was one of the things I was really glad that I picked up on
mhm,
and that was put in there because I think that opens up the floor to have more conversations about terms like that. A big thing on social media is like celebrating gotcha days and posting children with pictures and like was
mm,
in foster care for like 3,000 whatever days.
mm,
Or again, it seems performative. Is that benefiting the child when they're two,
mhm,
three, don't even know social media? It's
mm.
another of those things.
It's like the pendulum swings, right? So I can see where back then, in out of ignorance, that lady was probably trying, like you said, trying to make it a positive, and then it swings too far, it
Mhm.
overcorrect. And this is what it comes down to me, because I can imagine there's people out there, and when people like you and other people that are shining light on the non-positives, and they're like, "Oh, you're going to ruin it for everybody," or
Yeah,
whatever they might
yeah,
say. But I'm like, can we acknowledge that people are complex, situations are complicated, that there's nuance, there's pros and cons to everything. Like
mm,
nothing in life is all just one thing. So I'm like, I don't know why that's so controversial, that while adoption does have some good, there's also bad. Like, why can't we talk about both? Like,
yeah.
that's odd to me. Like,
There's so many sides to it, and I think we're also wrapped up into like our own personal journeys and tend to reflect that on other people's actions. Like,
yeah.
when we have those parasocial relationships too, because you're just like, oh, well, they should know better. Like that hurts me.
Ah, 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 ah.
I've
Yeah.
dedicated this time and whatever. But the thing is, like, the reality of parenting, especially when it comes to mothers, like mothers have been scrutinized like
Mm,
forever. And then you see a dad like take their child to the park and like, oh my God, like he's amazing. He did so
yeah.
great. You look at him
Yeah.
second time. And so when we add that in with the adoption nuance, like I get like
Mm,
how enticing like that positive narrative
yes, yes,
is. It's like,
yes.
wow, look, you adopted a baby. Wow, that's wonderful. And getting
Yeah.
that positive reinforcement in psychology shows that positive reinforcement, you're going to keep doing the thing.
Right.
So
Right.
Micah kept posting. And
Mm,
then like when they kind of tried to phase away with it, she mentioned that like Huxley was grieving and that he seemed
mm,
uncomfortable, so she was trying not to post him. Um and that like I think that really made me more aware of like her as a parent kind of being
mm,
smacked in the face with reality because I
mhm,
think we all had that moment where we're like, I fucked up. I
mhm.
fucked up. I need to do something different to support them.
Right.
But I think there were too many voices, too many people, too many kids that, shape this to implode. And I feel like we, as like parents and adoptive parents, like there needs to be room for them to complain because adopting a child is not easy. There are
Mhm.
like traumas that that child will have to work through, potential disabilities, different experiences as they get older, that will come up that, we don't have a lot of guidance for. Now we have a lot more, but it's still
Mhm.
in the beginning stages. So it's like, can we expect adoptive parents to do better if
Mhm.
we're not open to having these discussions? Because
Right.
I see it on the other end too, where adoptive parents will mention they're having a difficulty without identifying information. And sometimes like the internet will come down hard on them too. So I think like seeing Micah struggling and then the initial just like, wow, we didn't know that opening of
Mhm.
ears, it kind of reminded me of like postpartum depression. Like how
Mhm.
everybody
That's
is
a
like
great, yeah.
so happy to meet
Mhm.
the baby, but then the mother gets pushed aside and like she's tired, she's feeding the baby at all hours of the night. There are things going
Mhm.
on behind the scenes that are hard. And I
Mhm.
think that same thing is like when you adopt a child, even if they're a baby to an infant to an older child, there is going to be an adjustment period. There are going to
Right.
be huge changes. And I think families in general just need to acknowledge that you're not going to enjoy every single aspect of parenting.
Right.
Well, you're human.
Right.
You're going to make mistakes, but also having feelings is okay. It's okay
Right.
to be frustrated. And
Yeah.
we need to get out of that binary thinking of like good, bad. So I think that kind of started to kind of expose that a little bit more, seeing those little clips. So I really like how they
Mhm.
interspersed your commentary, the other family's commentary.
Yeah.
I have to say, it still was frustrating for me to see the family vloggers included in there.
Right.
Them like being like, oh, but the algorithm punishes us if we don't post this, and like, oh, it's
Right.
so much a struggle to pick out its title and this and that.
Right.
Like, I feel like that was like, what's the word for it? They kind of seemed oblivious, like
Yeah.
to miss the
I,
whole point of this.
I know. Well, and I kind of like, I believe this is a good word. And I kind of like that they included it in there because they are showing the lanes. So these are people that are in this lane that aren't thinking about all the other parts of it. And
The
so we're
blinders are.
getting right. So we're getting to see real, true, they're laying the foundation of like, so if you go to someone, again, that's watching this, that has no concept of YouTube and vlogging and sharing your life, why would anyone, the question is, why would anyone watch this? But also, why would anyone do this? And so they're interviewing these people that are like, this is why we do it and how we do it in the algorithm. And I kind of love that. I felt like that was a real moment of them sharing, like, yeah, the algorithm, you got to feed the algorithm more shocking things. And I'm like, yeah, it's so true. So let's talk about that. I'm glad they put some of that in there so that, again, I think the director, she wants people to have dialogue from this. So
Hmm.
they're going to put it out there. Yeah, the algorithm wants crazy stories of our kids. And then it's like, well, now we can decide and we can go, huh, what do we think about that? We should talk about this, guys, not just someone going, you should or shouldn't,
Yeah.
keep it real.
Did you have a chance to talk to any of those other families? Like, you guys never got to interact at all?
Mm-mm. That's why
Wow.
I told you it was such an interesting casual
Yeah.
experience because it was so. And I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and in everyone else is other places. And I think too, this is what I've learned from this back end is they don't always know how it's going to end up, how
Hmm.
much they're going to use of people. I think the director, they didn't know where the story was going to end up. And when they first interviewed me, I was like, what is this about? Can you sum it up? And they're like, we're still not sure quite yet because it's this huge topic of family vlogging. It's this huge topic of adoption. They're trying to meld it thanks to the staffers who did it, melded it for us, and then they're trying to unpack it. So I think, yeah, there wasn't a chance for us to really go, we know what we're going to be doing. It was like, let's talk to different people and then see how it comes together.
There are many, 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 many families that are doing this, that are flourishing like this. And then there was this one vlogger, Nikki Filippi. She wanted to adopt a
Mm.
child and canceled the adoption because the law, I think it was Thailand, they weren't allowed to film for a year. So she was already successful, but then growing her family, she was like, I want to adopt and become a family vlogger. And
Oy,
they
okay,
literally stopped the adoption because of that. And that was kind of like a huge scandal because it was,
of
again,
course.
off the edge of Micah Stafer's a whole
Right.
thing too. So like it was people were starting to be like, oh wow, like
Ah,
huh, this is a thing
yes,
people are
that
doing.
evokes emotion right now.
There was an article by the New York Times diving into mommy run influencer accounts for little girls in particular.
Ah,
And I think that like really opened my eyes because it went into like, behind the scenes and like, getting gifts, getting collaborations, making these little
mm,
girls like wear these outfits and do these different pictures. I
yeah,
think hearing more information and then like seeing kids who were once part of the family vloggers grow up and share their stories. Like you said, I don't think there's a lot of excuses left anymore. And like we all need to be aware that most parents
yes,
are well intentioned, but there
who
are
aren't filming it, who aren't posting it online for money. Yes, I would, because that's the part that I'm like, okay, so that Nikki person, I hadn't heard of them, and I haven't gone down the whole of current families and adopt and all that because I don't know if I could handle it quite yet. That's
yeah.
just to be honest, without being like, oh, it's so cringy, I can't. But I think like the way you sum that up, and I go, okay, if we're going, let's center around the child. And Cam said that so well in the documentary. He's like, I'm
Mhm.
trying to make this so we're not centering around the adopters per usual. But like, if you're really adopting truly for a genuine place, nowadays you should know you're doing it because for the child. It shouldn't
Mhm.
be for you or filling your hole or your need or you want to be a good. It should be for the child, knowing that the child is going to have their issues and trauma, just like any child, right? So, and even biological parents who have their kids for the wrong reasons of like, I want to feel fulfilled and I want to live vicariously through my kids, and then they F them up. It's the
Yeah.
same thing applies to adopting children if you're doing it for the wrong reason and not centering the child. So, if that vlogger, for example, if they couldn't film in Thailand, I'm like, but if your content was genuinely around sharing the experience, then if it was genuine, you should have kept going. Because then the
Yeah.
genuine, you wouldn't get any of the footage, but you could talk about it. You could talk about it and go, they wouldn't let us film, but we went, and here's our, because then again, you're not having to exploit the child. So
Mhm.
that answers that question for me. It was about being able to exploit the child, even if
Yeah.
they wouldn't call it that. That's what it was. If we can't film there, we can't get the content, we can't show the child, and that then because I'm like, then it wasn't for the child. It was
Yeah.
for the views.
And I think like we need to
That's
call
my
it a
opinion.
spade.
Yeah.
A lot of these family vloggers are selfish. And then when you add in these adoption and foster parent vloggers, like a huge portion of them are very exploitative, also very self-centered in what they want to share and their narrative. Um,
Yeah.
and
Because I think a good example is the other couple they interviewed in the documentary. And it's like, let's say a couple like them, they said they happened upon the Stoffers because they wanted to adopt as a couple to complete their family, start their family. They found the
Mhm.
Stoffers. So let's say a couple like that goes, well, there wasn't a lot out there for adoptees or to people interested in adoption. So we watched them. A couple like them could totally go create a channel and talk about adoption and never show their kid and do
Mhm.
it for the right reasons. Here's what happened for us. Here's the test we had to do, and not have to give any information about their child. And it would be just as respectable, just as informative. There's a way you can do it that isn't exploiting the kid.
Yeah, yeah. And like
That's my thought.
I get the drive because like you mentioned, like as an adoptee, a lot of my experience revolves family.
Yeah.
So my family growing up and now my nuclear family now with my husband and my kids. So
Hmm.
like part of me was like, I want to share these things and these changes and the
Mm,
nuances of being a mom, but like sharing it in a way that doesn't exploit my kids. And so like
yeah.
occasionally, I would say like maybe once or twice a year, I'll do like a short family vlog. It's like, oh, we saw this show on Broadway or
Yeah.
we went to New York City. But going in and like making those videos, like non-creators don't get it. You need all
Yeah.
these clips. You're editing it. You're figuring out, do you want to do a voiceover, commentary, caption, title, all these different aspects for a few moments in time. So it's like, what are we doing here? Like, am I
Hmm.
doing something that is good for my kids? Like, what do my kids get from this? Or this is this just for me? And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I had to admit it. Like posting these
Hmm.
videos, really, they're not for my kids. They're not going to watch them. They can if they want, but like
Right.
at the end of the day, it's not for them. It's for me to share my experience. And that
Right.
that's the give and take
Yeah.
when it comes to family vloggers and a lot of adoption influencers. When they get defensive, they're like, well, adoption is part of my story too.
Okay.
And it's like, yes, adoption is part of your story, but you aren't the vulnerable person here. And
Right.
when you decided to adopt, you decided to put that child's best interest before yours.
That's it.
And that's not happening in a lot of.
Correct. That's it. Yeah. Because it's like it can still be your story. Go on and talk about it.
Mhm.
You don't have to, again, show the child or share any of their information, but you could talk about what you went through. I had to fill out this form and I had to, and I'm feeling this. You can
Mhm.
totally do that. Talk from I'm doing this, I'm feeling this, So I think there is a way people can do it. So when they make that argument of it's my story too, I'm like, there's
Yeah.
holes in that.
And it's nice to see that because content creators like yourself who are like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, switch gears. And then there are other like mom and dad influencers who do parenting content that
Mm-hmm.
rarely or never include kids. One of my
Mm,
favorite foster parent bloggers is Laura, and she does like these scenarios or like skits to teach people about,
ah,
but never once has she included her children.
that's cool.
Um, her and I have become friends, but like before that, I didn't know her kids' names. I didn't
Yeah,
know
that's
how
cool.
old they were. I didn't know what their favorite snack was.
Yeah.
But if you think about certain things, you're like, wow, I know all this information about this random person's kid. So I wanted to ask you, like now with your content, since you've moved past that, I really love what you're doing with your business. I think it's super important and like finding makeup that fits like
Yeah.
different, ethnicities. Like people don't
Yeah.
realize that we have different textures, like the
Yeah.
undertones and stuff
Yeah.
too. So like
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing like I connect with. So it's really
Mm-hmm.
cool to see how you took that and um how that inspired your business. Has social media helped your business flourish? Like, is that an avenue that like is not just creative, but also is helpful with getting like the word out?
Yes. Definitely. And I think let's go back to like social media when it started and before we knew, it's called social media. We use it to be social and to share information with people. And now it's turned into like it's business and marketing. And it all goes, to me, that all goes hand in hand. And
Yeah.
that's where some of my friends that are innocently, their only followers and friends online and their accounts are private are their family and friends. So when they share their kids in the zoo and all that, it's like, yeah, because it's social. They're sharing what they're doing with, they're doing it in a way I think they're private. Social media is phenomenal. It's where, again, I decided to take my content back to where I started, which was beauty and makeup, connecting with people who look like me, who have features like mine. And now I can go back to that first passion and continue connecting, continue finding people, continue taking feedback. It's been wonderful.
When you made that refresh, we talked about it a little bit earlier. What are like the top three things that you thought about now with this shift? Like,
Yeah.
one I would assume is like removing your child from the content from like the daily vlogs and stuff. Like, was that
Yeah.
a very like cognizant thing?
It was very cognizant. And I'm pretty someone I shift quickly. It's like you can see it in my hair and my look, my
Yeah.
style. Like I'm over that, I'm moving on. So it doesn't take too much, but there was thought behind it. And when I say it kind of intersected with me being approached to do this interview and at the same time seeing my daughter developing her personality. So it was back there. Like as a mom, you're seeing the type of kid your kid has suddenly an interest in a certain sport and then you go okay they're interested like you're going to naturally want to gravitate and help them I think to that right so
Yeah,
it came
yeah.
she's poor she's more private I want to give her that privacy my husband's an extremely private person and like sometimes people meet me and they're like I didn't even know you were married I'm like we're married almost 9 years because he doesn't want and he married someone like me who's very on there but I'm like I want to respect that for her now before she knows she wants to be respected for it but one of the things I didn't mention before that happened is, so I'm already starting to think about it. I've started interviewing for this documentary. I'm thinking I should probably start giving her privacy. And then someone replied to a story I posted of her and they just said, fuck you to her. Like they're replying to her, the post. And I don't get many trolls online.
Yeah.
I don't care anyways. So, and again, I don't read a lot of comments and stuff. So it doesn't phase me, but they're not talking to me. They're talking to my baby. And so that was like, yeah, this isn't cool. There's already people being trolls on her and she's had no, so it was cognizant. And I think the few main thoughts I had was it feels icky to monetize. It just does. She hasn't expressed to me she wants to be a paid actress and that's going to be her career in life. So I'm like, there's no real excuse for me to make money off of her. And no other parent outside of entertainment does that to their kid. They're like, let kids be kids. My kid's barely trying to figure out how to do addition. They're not like, why am I going to make them make money now? And then privacy and just giving her that. Like, we didn't have digital footprints as kids. We have photos in our closet somewhere that are prints for no one to see but us. So why I want to give that to her, It was a pretty quick shift. And I had to play around with my channel because I had, hundreds of videos. I've been on YouTube since 2009. And I had to, that was a gradual over the last year of like, what do I take down and what do I private?
Okay.
And I had a moment where I was like, maybe I'll keep up some of the big ones of her that seem like people were interested in. Like some of my pregnancy, I did keep up one for a while of like when I first introduced her as newborn, because I went, again, giving the people what they want. They've been following, they love me, they're going to love her. Some of her eating videos that went viral. And then one day, and like a while back, I just had a thought. I'm like, who cares? No one really cares. All these 90,000 people that have watched this video, they're watching mine and other people's. So there was no good excuse to myself to keep it up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't know. I just don't have a good excuse. This isn't a business. I don't care if people want to see my content, they come see beauty stuff. I don't know. It just was a really easy decision at that point.
I totally get that. It's just wild what you have to think about. And when you mentioned like the eating videos, like for me, I've been in like this dark side of just like, what's wrong with family vlogging. And then it really pops to my mind. I'm like, oh, Ren. Have you heard about Ren?
Oh God, of course. That's like,
So,
oh my gosh, that's so
so
rough.
there's all these different things. I think you step back and being like, there are different family vloggers who are out there just doing this and happen to be making money, and others that are just flat out exploiting, do not care, who know what they're doing. And so it's just like there need to be bare minimum standards that we can just agree upon as a society
Right.
to protect kids. And I think that starts, like you said, by having these conversations. And just a recap, one of the ways that you started to your channel and child safety was just like stop monetizing anything with your child. Take her out of the majority of your videos. And would you say, do you have another tip for parents out there?
I'm like, I have this thought. Not necessarily a tip, but here's one of if someone wants to check themselves, and I know the dark side to it too. I watched the whole Dr. Phil thing when more than half of the videos being saved of little girls eating is men. Why would men? It's icky. I didn't want to know, but I'm glad I know. Knowledge is power, but also it's horrifying. But I just think let's say you kept sharing your child, and getting the money, but let's say all that money was tied up, 100% went to them. Let's say that was a regulation in the world, even ads. So let's say, well, Google spend and all that will go to my child's account, 100% of it. But I can still do ad deals. But let's say 100% of those ad deals, $10,000 goes, you can't touch it as the parent. Would you still do it? That's my question. Think about that. Because then I'm like, would you have the motivation to keep working so hard and keep sharing if you can't make the money from it?
No, that's a good
Not
question.
it. Just something to think about.
I think that is key there too. I really enjoyed this conversation. Like you said, I feel like we could go on for hours, but is there
Yeah.
anything else you want to mention before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I think I'm so grateful again to be a part of the documentary. I think we're talking about a lot of big topics. Even in this, we're talking a lot about the vlogging aspect of it, even though this is an adoptee platform. But I think the whole point that I hope people take away from the docu-series is that adoption is a real serious thing, to think well about it. Think about it before you do it. Don't share about it unless you're doing it in a different way. Go seek out resources like you, professionals and experts. Listen, Cam said it so well in his point where he was like, let's say you are open minded to the fact that love might not be enough and that you might not be enough for your kid. What do you do then? There's so much good resources out there. And I just hope it makes people start having a dialogue about all these big topics.
That's awesome. And then I have one last question. You're experiencing with filming as an adoptee. Sometimes when I'm bringing up things, it feels very heavy, and it can bring stuff
Mm.
up, the anger, the abandonment, trauma, things like that. Did you have to deal with that while you were filming, and how did you take care of yourself during that time?
No, that's a good question. I think because I am someone I like to jump into things. I'm spontaneous by nature. So I went into it not realizing at one point when they're like, we'd like to see if you're comfortable with it, some of your adoptee paperwork, baby photos. And I was like, oh, I wasn't fully aware. I went in just like, oh, whatever happens. And I definitely cry in it. We see that in the second one. And I feel like personally, it was a little cathartic and healing for me in a way, just to be able to have a platform to talk about it,
Mm.
because I haven't had that in my life. No one out there is going, hey, Hannah, here's hours to just sit down and talk to us about show us. And so that it was almost healed me in a sense, to be an adult that has the power over my own story now. And I think afterwards, what it's done, I didn't necessarily feel like I had to do any self care from it. I felt empowered, to be honest, of I can talk about it to anyone and I know how I feel about it. And it was nice.
That's so glad to hear.
Yeah.
I was talking to the director last week, and she mentioned that one of the producers, I think, was an adoptee, to involve like adoptees in a lot of this planning. And I think that is like key here to why so many adoptees are really appreciating this documentary, having adoptees like you and Cam on it with the different perspectives. It just, like you said, it's empowering to see that,
Mm,
to look at Max and see an adoptee and like being,
mm,
wow, look, she's up there talking about this. That's crazy.
yeah.
It means how many
Yeah.
people are now aware of this. It paves the path for more change. So I just
Yeah.
want to say I really appreciate you doing this.
I'm really happy and proud of the way the director and the team told this story. And I think if it ends the way I think it is going to end, I think it'll be good. I hope.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Can you just share how people can find you, your socials? I'm going to put
Oh,
the tags all down in the captions and stuff, but just for people listening, where can they find you and watch your videos?
it's Hannah Cho Beauty on everything. So I think I have that handle on everything. And then on my Instagram, it's Hello Hannah Cho, but it's still associated with Hannah Cho Beauty. And just look for the girl with the tattoos. That's how you Google Hannah Cho. There's a lot of us that pop up and we can look similar. Just I have the tats. That's how you.
It's funny because today you're all covered, so you're
I know.
like
I
it's
look so neutral. I know. It's
you're
cold.
boring today.
I know. Just plain.
But yes, thank you again. I hope more people check out your makeup because, again, a valuable tool, and who doesn't want to look their best? So having the framework to do that, I think it's amazing and empowering. And I know you're helping many people out.
Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review, and check out my books from your local library. For more conversations on adoption, check out Adoptee Thoughts on your favorite podcast platform. And if you want to learn more about my work, head over to adopteethoughts.com or search Adoptee Thoughts on any social media platform. And remember to keep leaning into the uncomfortable, because that's where real growth happens.